I'm David Clement, and this is Inside Israel, a Forum Daily special report. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into Israel after Hamas's October 7th terrorist attack. And I'm joined by former federal cabinet minister Stockwell, who has recently returned from a trip to Israel, where he visited the communities that were devastated by Hamas. Stockwell, thank you very much for sitting down with us today.
Hi, David. Thanks for your interest.
I want to start by taking a look at some of the footage you shot while you toured the communities that were attacked by Hamas, and we'll play this first clip now.
Gasoline from Gaza. שלום. אהלן. רק אנחנו מחכים לכם, אז אם אתם יכולים... Patients from the Erez crossing to treat...
We have heard stories of the mutilation happened also in the home.
היי, מה נשמע?
Stockwell, walk us through what we're looking at here.
Yeah, thanks for that clip. That's helpful for viewers to see it. Basically, if people can sort of keep in mind that on the southern border, where it's really a lot of fences, very strong kind of barbed wire fences. But on those communities, these are communities, they're just like a gated community in Canada or the US, with one exception, the city of Sderot. It's about 30,000 people also on the border. And you can see where the attack came from. It's just like looking across a field, an empty field. It's about a 10-minute jog to all the city of where Gaza is. And so I asked security forces, how did 3,000 terrorists cross that really short piece of land unseen and hit these communities with the violence that they did at 6:30 in the morning? So this attack was planned for a couple of years. Only a few people at the top knew what the date was. At 4 o'clock that morning, as in every morning in Gaza, men by the hundreds and thousands started filing into mosques across the field on the Gaza side. And that's when the order was given. That's when the weapons were handed out. People had the explosives, and the attack, when services would usually end about 6 or 6:30, 3,000 militants either running or in vehicles or in hang gliders attacked. The devastation was something like I have never seen before. I've toured and been to Afghanistan. I've been to areas of conflict and war before. To be toured through there, to hear directly about the viciousness of the attacks, David. I don't want to, alarm viewers, but the gang rapes that took place at the music festival and in the communities, the mutilations, babies that were burned alive, literally in ovens. So to be in there, to actually see where it happened, and to have all of this confirmed later on in visits at the Hadassah Hospital, where the top surgeons in the world attended to the massive amounts of survivors that were pouring in there in terrible condition, to listen to the head of gynecology at the hospital, Hadassah Hospital, confirm all of these things. So to walk through these what have once been beautiful communities that will never be returned to. People that I've talked to there, they will never be able to go back. The scene was as horrific as I think as anything has been recorded in modern history.
Is there any interest in rebuilding those communities, or is this just something that needs to be walked away from the perspectives of those who did survive?
That's a great question. What they've already started doing is you can see in the one picture that you put up there, it showed a young couple that was murdered, burned alive, actually. Again, horrific to walk into these places and literally smell the effects of people having been burned alive. So they are going to keep a couple of these, and they're going to develop them into historic sites, almost like modern day Holocaust memorials, because they do want people to see them. But all of the inhabitants to this point are saying they simply can never return.
Stockwell, you've highlighted the proximity here in terms of the distance When we come back from the break, I want to dig a little deeper into just how close or what it's like to live next door to a terrorist organization like Hamas. So please stay with us. We will have more on this Forum Daily special report when we return from the commercial. Stockwell, you've highlighted just how devastated these communities are, but I think for a lot of Canadians, it can be difficult to understand just how close major Israeli cities are to where rocket fire comes from, to where they cross the border. We're going to play another clip from your trip to Israel.
You can see this is Jaffa. Christians will know this as the place where Peter got the vision to, you can eat all different types of food and to take the message out to the world. And just beyond Jaffa is Tel Aviv. And then right here, it's a misty day, but you can see the outline of buildings down there. Just past those buildings, that's Gaza. And rockets do come over from Gaza. They can come all the way to Tel Aviv. This is a very real crisis.
So, I mean, just what is it like, whether you're living in the south next to the border with Gaza or obviously a little further away in the example in that clip? What is it like for the people who are living in these areas where the threat of rocket attack is essentially indefinite?
It's a surreal existence, David. I frankly, I don't know how I could do it. And having visited there a number of times over the years, so these are beautiful gated communities. They're right on the border. You can see Gaza, you can see the buildings, and there are bomb shelters in all of the homes there, and within 20 seconds on the streets. You have to be 20 seconds from any bomb shelter because for years the rockets have come over and they land in there. Sometimes people get killed. The people who live in these gated communities, what they are, these kibbutz, these are kind of like the peace-loving, organic farming. They're not too enmeshed in politics. They just want to live beautiful, peaceful lives. Some days they even fly kites, these large kites, up high in the air with banners hanging down saying love and peace, so the people in Gaza can literally see it. So in 2005, when Israel said, look, we are going to completely take all the Jewish people out of the Gaza area, even though it's high risk. And it was in 2005 that happened. Hamas took over then. Hamas won the elections. There's never been an election since. And attacks are almost daily in some form or other. I visited there, I was there a few years ago, driving down the road, the middle of the road where the median was with grass in it was on fire because they were sending balloons over with, that were lit on fire. So they live every day with that, but it's difficult to imagine. They never expected, they always expected there would be these irritants, but they never expected the full force of really one of the largest terrorist attacks, 3,000 terrorists in history. So there's been this eerie kind of existence. There are the psychiatric centers in these communities, this has gone on for years, have to treat the kids up to 13, 14 years old who they bedwet at night because there's sirens every single night for years. So they kind of get, like, I didn't get used to it the few days I was there over the years, but they kind of get immune to it. The other thing that's a tragic human thing is every day crossing the border legally are people from Gaza who the folks in these kibbutzes take in, and they're workers there. They work on the commune with them. They eat in their homes. And the whole time, as they now know, they were taking notes. The Gazans, the Palestinians who were there were taking notes of where the firearms were kept. And those notes were all used in the planning of the attack. So what had been a multi-year kind of a surreal existence dealing with the reality of maybe daily missiles coming over was radically ruptured with the full-on attack. And they said, hours after the attack happened, once the attackers were sending the news back to Gaza, which is only a few hundred yards away, that they were successful, they'd overtaken. Then the looters started swarming in from Gaza. The whole thing, the trauma, of course, the physical trauma was the worst, but the emotional trauma of knowing that so many Palestinians supported this it's just been too overwhelming. That's sort of been this proximity is something I'm glad you showed that Canadians just don't really realize they live with this every day.
Yeah, it's as a Canadian, it's hard to grasp living next door to a hostile neighbor, living next. Despite whatever disagreements we may have with Americans at times, it's the most peaceful border in the world and has been for over 200 years. When we come back, Stockwell, I want to take a look at one of the bigger criticisms about Israel and its treatment of Muslims or Arabs in the country. So stay with us. We'll have more on our in-depth look inside Israel, our special report here on Forum Daily. Stockwell, another big question here is the status of Arabs or Muslims inside Israel. We see the accusation that Israel is an apartheid state. That's obviously a very charged terminology given its history. We'll pull up another one of your clips, and I'd like for you to comment more on that accusation.
If we look at these buildings over here at Jaffa, we can see right here, you can see a mosque, you can see a church, you can see a synagogue. Freedom of religion in Israel. People are out of touch enough to sometimes say that Israel is an apartheid state. It's completely ridiculous, non-factual. It's a democracy, freedom of religion, freedom of expression, Arabs and Jews living together and Christians. This is the situation, and all in the proximity of the danger of Hamas in Gaza.
Stockwell, what do those who think that Israel is an apartheid state have wrong?
Honestly, David, when the first accusations and using the word apartheid first materialized, it was, several years ago, the UN started having this conference, Durham conference, saying Israel's an apartheid state. It literally would be hilarious if it wasn't so tragic. Mm-hmm. Israel is the only democracy in that whole region. Israel allows freedom of religion. So right where I was standing, literally you can see the mosque, you can see churches, mm-hmm. you can see the synagogues. Go a little further, just a little further north where I was, you can see the Baha'i temples. Complete freedom of religion, freedom to vote. Muslims who live in Israel, it's about 20% of the population, so we're talking hundreds of thousands, well, actually probably over a couple million right now, yep. They're allowed to vote. There are Muslim members of the Knesset, what we would call members of parliament. There are Muslims. There are Muslims on the Supreme Court mm-hmm. in Israel. There is freedom to practice how you want to live. Complete equality of men and women, which is not a case in any of the Islamic states which surround Israel. And, it's sort of heartbreaking to see when you see the protests around North America or in Europe, and they're saying apartheid, and then you see groups like Queers for Palestine. Yeah. Honestly, my heart goes out to those folks, because if they lived in any of those Islamic countries, especially right across the border in Gaza, they would be killed. They need to understand it. Gays, trans, they would be killed. There is no freedom of religion in those countries. If a Jew happens, and it does happen occasionally, gets sidelined, crosses that border accidentally, and is caught in Gaza, they will 98% be killed, if not tortured. Mm-hmm. So to call Israel apartheid, which embraces all the modern freedoms that we know, is just beyond imagination. There is absolutely no truth to it.
Well, why do you think that's the choice of wording? You've highlighted some very important distinctions, some of the keys to a liberal, modern, democratic state. Why do you think apartheid is the word choice that's used?
Well, if you're going to construct a narrative and keep it active that Israel is somehow an evil place, then you've got to find words that conjure up evil. Mm-hmm. And really, to say apartheid is really an insult to all of the years, the decades that the people of South Africa endured true apartheid. It's heartbreaking to see that word applied. But those who are frankly hate-filled, who wrongfully want to claim that Israel is somehow a colonizer or an occupier, Israel, which, as you know, going back to the time of Abraham, was 2,000 years before the time of Christ, the time when Moses and the people of Israel were ordered by the Pharaoh of the day to go into what we call Canaan, the Promised Land. That was 1,500 years before the time of Christ. Islam didn't appear even on the scene until 632 was the death of Islam's prophet Muhammad. So, you know, for Islam showed up like 3,000 years after the Jews even appeared on the land. So to go back and try and push back against the most archaeologically proven indigenous rights, really, of any people probably on earth, you have to come up with really inflammatory terminology, so inflammatory that it just blinds people to the facts. That's one of the reasons that word is being used.
Yeah, I think to some extent it almost feels like we've taken a North American discussion in regards to colonization and attempted to overlay it on the region. And you've certainly highlighted some aspects of why that may not be in fact true. But essentially what we're arguing about is two people who claim to be the rightful owners of the same land. And when we come back from the break, that's what I want to touch on next, is what happens next? How do we get lasting peace? In our last segment here of Stockwell, I want to talk about what happens next. Many people are pushing for a two-state solution. That has been the position of our Prime Minister. It also includes President Joe Biden. It also includes a former guest of ours on Forum Daily. Here is former Israeli hostage negotiator Gershon Baskin on the necessity of a two-state solution.
But the second thing that we need to do is change our government in Israel and have a new leadership here and a new leadership in Palestine and an international commitment to move forward to implementation of the two-state solution. Israel will never have security if the Palestinians don't have freedom and dignity, and the Palestinians will never have freedom and dignity if Israel doesn't have security. This is a deal that has to be made between these two people who share this land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea.
Stockwell, what are some of the limitations here on a two-state solution? Because it feels like there are a lot of people internationally and including those in Israel who, in a perfect world, want a two-state solution. But we know historically this has just been something that has never gotten over the finish line.
Yeah, the good observations. The obstacles, honestly, to peace are huge. Not insurmountable, but they're huge. Biggest obstacle, the most existential one, obviously, is Hamas itself, which says, and has always said, they do not want to negotiate. They do not want, Hamas does not want a two-state solution. They want to vaporize Israel, as does Iran. Iran has been very clear to that. And they also want to kill all Jews everywhere, all the time. And recently, and we've got coverage on this, we've seen Hamas leaders standing in public on television and saying they want to normalize these massacres. And they want the massacres to go on and on and on. So there has to be the elimination of Hamas as a first step in the Gaza area, so that the people of Gaza, the Palestinians, who for a generation now have been fed, even in the textbooks to children, the most horrendous lies. And, you know, we've got interview clips, 6-year-old beautiful little Palestinian girl being asked what she wants to do, and she grows up and she says, I want to kill a Jew. I want to stab a Jew in the face. Children have been raised on this now since 2005, where when Israel completely pulled out of the area. So the first step has to be to deal with Hamas. Next step has to be to make sure that the billions of dollars every year, which goes into Gaza to supposedly help the people there, it can't go to building tunnels. It can't go to buying arms. There's got to be an independent agency set up so that the billions of dollars can go into restoring Gaza to where it should be. It's a seaside, beautiful area, and it should be prosperous. So Hamas has got to be dealt with. Next has to be a realization that Israel has always been and continues to be in favor of a two-state solution. but they can't look at, and they found out painfully, giving back the areas that were attacked. They were attacked from in the war in 1948, 67, 73. They held the areas from which they were attacked, and they have always said, these areas will go back as soon as there is a peace signed. And Yasser Arafat, if you remember in the famous photos that the Oslo Accords, was seen signing and saying, yes, we'll do it. And then he walked away, and the series of attacks called the Intifada, the brutal terrorist attacks, school buses and children in Israel started. So Israel is waiting. Israel is waiting for a firm commitment from the nations that surround it. Egypt is basically on side. Egypt many years signed peace, so did Jordan. And the Abraham Accords, which were started a few years ago, give great hope. But there will be no peace while Hamas is still allowed to rule there. They have to be taken out. And frankly, countries like Canada have to stop funding the United Nations Work Relief Agency. It's called UNRWA. It gives billions of dollars a year that goes straight to the Hamas terrorists and straight to this horrific educating of the children. Stopping that is a first step, and beginning to normalize living in Gaza are going to be first steps to a two-state solution that people in Israel and all the politicians there agreed to it. But David, I can tell you, I've never seen, Israelis are famous for arguing among themselves about everything. I've never seen the country so united on this one task. We must eliminate Hamas, get rid of that poison, and then there's a possibility of moving to a two-state solution.
Stockwell, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for your interest.
I'm David Clement, and that'll do it for Inside Israel, a Forum Daily special report.